Welcome to the 1-0 podcast hosted by Joe Cook and Brad Kellner. We're part of the Everyone Gets a Trophy podcast channel, and today we will talk a lot of Texas basketball. Two big wins for Texas after succumbing to the Red Raiders in Lubbock, including a thriller versus Kansas. We'll also get into some talking about their upcoming matchup with the Baylor Bears in Waco before getting into some 2023 recruiting storylines. Make sure you listen to our show and the Everyone Gets a Trophy podcast with Kevin Dunn and Paul Wadlington. Subscribe, rate, and review, and please be a good patron to our sponsors.
Yeah, audio-visual consultations. Give them a call, 512-255-8678. If you're looking for the home TV setup of your dreams, AV Consultations can hook you up. Make sure you get it done by the NCAA Tournament. avconsultations.com is their website. And the 1-0 podcast is also brought to you by Altstadt Brewery, Altstadt Beer. It is German beer made here. The best beer that you can find all throughout the state of Texas, available in Central Texas, the Houston area, the DFW Metroplex, wherever you buy your beer. Make sure the next time you're at the store, you pick up a 6-pack of Altstadt beer. No impurities, no regrets.
So last time we talked about Texas's loss at Texas Tech. And I think kind of looking back at that, it wasn't a good matchup for Texas, honestly. And we saw that they were a little bit shaken by the environment that they were in. And I think the key to this team is if Timmy Allen can kind of successfully bring the ball up the floor. And that wasn't really a thing that Texas Tech allowed him to do. And then I think we talked about Iowa State being a pretty poor matchup for the Longhorns, but something that we noticed both in the Iowa State game, and we'll get to it eventually with the Kansas game, is that Texas basically just shut down two of the best scorers in the Big 12, and they especially did it against Isaiah Brockington and Iowa State.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Iowa State's been struggling in Big 12 play. I think they're last in the Big 12 right now. So I had some confidence for Texas going into that game, even though the Longhorns lost in Ames earlier this year. Like the Iowa State team that started the season 13-0 and was ranked in the top 15, that team is long gone. So they've been struggling a little bit, but still a ranked win, still a quality win for Texas over an Iowa State team who has beaten some good opponents this year. So for the Longhorns to have the second half that they had, it wasn't a 40-minute domination against the Cyclones. I think it was a 2-point game at recess, and then Texas just dominated on both ends of the floor in the second half. That was a really, really good showing by the Longhorns, and another quality win for Texas. So you're right. Isaiah Brockington has been one of the best players in the Big 12 this year. Texas held him to 5-17 from the floor, only 12 points, only got to the line a couple of times too. He's been doing a lot of his work at the charity stripe this season. So Texas with stifling defense. I mean, that's a staple of Chris Beard, right? Texas held Iowa State to 28% shooting. They were 2 of 15 from three. Obviously, the 41 points, that's probably the number that sticks out the most. I mean, 41 points in a 40-minute game. Phenomenal defense by Texas. And then as the game progressed, Joe, the Longhorns did more and more offensively to distance themselves from the Cyclones. So one of the most impressive performances to date from Texas, especially what they did in the final 20 minutes last Saturday.
Yeah, just looking at the box score real quick, 18 points in the second half by Iowa State. That'll win you basketball games. And even though we've complained about Texas's offense, they have enough offense to win if they're only giving up 18 points and a half. More than enough offense to win if they're giving up 18 points and a half. And the other thing that you're noticing, I think, from Chris Beard is that they're able to pick things up and make some changes after halftime. And I think the Iowa State game was good evidence of that, mostly because the Texas offense had a long dry spell, I'm pretty sure, in that first half. And I think they needed that like 5-0 run at the very, I think it was a 5-0 run, something like that, maybe 4-0 run at the end to take that 25-23 lead at halftime. So they have their first half problems, and they've had their first half problems in quite a few games. Heck, they've had a couple second half problems. The one that sticks out, the reason they lost to Seton Hall games because they couldn't score in the second half. So they continue to have some of these droughts, and I think that's personnel related. But when Iowa State, like I kind of mentioned with Texas Tech, Iowa State doesn't have a guy who can really defend Timmy Allen in his multiple roles. And he was able to bring the ball up the floor and get some things going for Texas. And Texas started to hit their shots. So good for them to get that revenge win, get that win at home. I don't think it'll be a quadrant one win, but all these games are going to be tough, and they're going to be good good building blocks on the resume anyway, just because of how well respected the Big 12 is this year. And, you talked about Iowa State. They're standing in the Big 12 right now. Still, they are the number 38 team in the net. So they're a top 50 team in net. They're going to be, the analytics, and this is the most important analytics, the ones that the NCAA tournament uses, the selection committee uses. Think highly of all these teams. Every one of them is top 70. So just any Big 12 win, and especially before the stretch that they had or entered coming up, and with that Kansas game.
Yeah, I'm looking at the bracket matrix right now. That's a website that compiles all of the bracketologies from around the interwebs, and they've got Iowa State as a 7. Like, the average bracketology prediction for Iowa State right now is a 7 seed. So, like, that's a team in the tournament. So it's a win for Texas over a tournament team. They didn't get a lot of those in non-conference play. Matter of fact, the only non-con tournament win they have was against Tennessee, and that obviously just happened like 2 weeks ago. So they didn't stockpile a lot of wins early in the season against tournament teams, and over the last couple of weeks, they've stockpiled 3 or 4. So yeah, Iowa State, despite their struggles in the conference, that's still a win for Texas over a tournament team, and it was a dominating win for the Longhorns. And look, we can use this as a transition to Kansas if we want to do that, but a theme that we've seen from Texas in the last 2 games was not only forcing turnovers, Joe, but taking advantage of those turnovers. Yes. They forced 18 turnovers against Iowa State. They forced 15 against Kansas the other night. The Longhorns are outscoring their opponents 48-8 off of turnovers in those last 2 games. So it's one thing to just create turnovers. That's great. Obviously, you're preventing the other team from scoring when you do that, but it's another thing to turn those takeaways into points on the other end. And Texas has really succeeded at that in each of the last 2 games. And that's why they've got 2 wins over ranked opponents to show for it.
Yeah, I'd say that's a big reason why they were able to beat Kansas, if we want to start moving to that game, because, first they had played a Monday game, first big Monday of the game of the year. You got Jay Billis, and quickly on that, I went home and rewatched that game. You forget how Jay Billis kind of has a condescending tone a little bit.
Yeah.
But he highlights X's, and he uses the lingo. He highlights the X's and O's of basketball better than I remember. I haven't watched a ton of Big Monday or Billis games this year. So I remember, he still has that I'm smarter than you tone, which may be kind of true. Duke educated guy who knows a lot about basketball.
He went to Duke. Doesn't everybody who went to Duke have that tone?
But at the same time, he identified a lot of different things. And he identified, one thing that he identified was that game was a physical war. Like, one of the biggest complaints that Billis seemed to have was that teams were just getting foul calls were being not made left and right. And while that's kind of a thing of Big 12 basketball, I'm glad that Texas was able to get into one of those games with a top 5 team in the country and still hold their own, because a lot of criticism about Texas and mainly centered around some of their post players is that they're not the most physically imposing. I don't want to call them soft, but they're when you're going up against David McCormick's got 30 pounds on Trey Mitchell and Christian Bishop, but they pretty much held their own against that crew. But to go back to your point about turnovers, that's why Texas won this game. Texas, they didn't shoot great from the field. Kansas shot amazing from the field, but Texas had 19 more field goal attempts, and they had the same amount of makes as a result. Texas also did well from the line, but those turnovers, forcing turnovers, playing that physical basketball to create those added opportunities at the offensive end. That's why Texas won the game, and you can credit a lot of that to keeping the ball out of Ochai Abaji's hands.
Yeah. Turnovers and offensive rebounding, I think, were massive for the Longhorns. I did a YouTube live stream right after the game, and somebody commented like, man, rebounding almost cost us tonight. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, Texas won that game because of rebounding. 15 offensive rebounds. It's why they took 19 more shots than Kansas did, like you said, Joe. So yeah, doing the dirty work, man. Those are Chris Beard staples too. I mean, you think of defense, but you also think of just tenacity for 40 minutes. You saw that from Texas the other night, and it was an impressive performance. And yeah, to your point about slowing down Ochai Abaji, Abaji's the leading scorer in the Big 12. He should be a first-team All-American when it's all said and done. He's probably going to be this conference's player of the year too when the year comes to an end. He's an absolute stud. and he didn't get into double digits until the last minute of the game, right? He had that tip in with
That's
just over a
what it
minute to play.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, and it felt like a dagger, right? That put Kansas up 4 with a minute to go, and you're like, oh, man, we fought so hard, and that's how this is going to end, right? But then Texas obviously responded with that great run to close things out. They got some help from some Kansas missed free throws. Texas forced a couple of turnovers down the stretch too, kind of a microcosm of the game. But you're right. I mean, defending the best players on Iowa State and Kansas, kind of taking them out of the game, forcing other players to beat you. That's a pretty good recipe for success. And Texas succeeded the last couple of nights.
Yeah, just looking at the Kansas starters, you had David McCormick had 16, Jalen Wilson had 18, and Christian Brown had 13. So that's a Kansas team scoring 76 with those three in double figures and Jalen Wilson having a big game. If Ochai Agbaji hits his normal total, Kansas is maybe putting up 90 or something like that. So that speaks to just how, I think it honestly speaks to just how good Kansas really is.
Yeah.
They have those multiple threats, and it took Courtney Ramey playing the defensive game of his life. Gave a winning effort on that end of the floor, face guarding Agbaji and making sure he couldn't get away. The fact that's what Chris Beard basically said. Hey, your four have to your best four, your other four have to beat our five.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And luckily it worked out thanks to the turnovers, because the guys who aren't Ochai Agbaji aren't as secure with the basketball.
Yeah, that's a huge win for Texas, man. I mean, Kansas should win at least a share of the Big 12 this year. Like, they don't have a lot of tough games left. They have a lead right now in the conference. I think a half-game lead over Baylor right now for first place in the league. But, like, Kansas should end up winning at least a share of this league when it's all said and done. So to get a win over them is really, really impressive. And it's far and away the most impressive win of the year for Texas, both in terms of the eye test and in terms of the selection committee too. And I think my favorite part of the win, Joe, was Texas won in a way that they haven't won all year. Going into that game against Kansas on Monday, the Longhorns were 0-3 when their opponents scored 70 or more. Like, that had been an issue. If the other team was able to get the 70, Texas just didn't have the offense to get the 72, and that was ball game. Well, Texas changed that on Monday. All right, KU scored 76. As you mentioned, the Longhorns were able to score 79. So we talk about the defense forcing takeaways, and that's impressive against Kansas, who is one of the best offensive teams in the country. I think Ken Palm has them as the third most efficient offense in all of college basketball. So to force those turnovers, to make Kansas struggle at times on that end of the floor is great. But for Texas to score 40 and then 39 in the two halves, like, we haven't seen that offensive consistency over the span of a 40-minute game from Texas all season, especially against a good team, let alone a great team like Kansas. So that was cool to me. That was the coolest part of the win. Like, Texas winning in a way that they haven't won in all year. I would have been impressed with any W, of course. But to me, 79-76 feels more impressive than like 65-62, because it showed me, Joe, that, okay, if Texas does get into a little bit of a shootout, not a crazy shootout, I don't want Texas playing games in the 80s or 90s or anything like that. But if they do,
I don't think anybody at Texas does.
No. But if they do need to score in the 70s to win a basketball game, they can do it.
Yeah, exactly. The only problem really with that game was distant shooting.
Yep.
And not a lot of that is really due to Kansas, I feel like. It was mostly because Texas wasn't hitting looks. And you had Marcus Carr make that one as time expired at halftime. You had him hit one more, I believe. And then Trey Mitchell's bank shot at the very end of the game. Like, those were basically the only those were the only makes of 19 attempts. And there were a good amount of those 19 attempts that were solid looks. Mitchell shot some that I don't want to say they weren't awful shots. Now, they didn't look good as a result, but like set up and in the offense, they were fine. Courtney Ramey missed some open looks. Andrew Jones missed some open looks. Like, that's a big nitpick and something that even Chris Beard knows that they're going to have to improve, because they know that with as few possessions as they play, with the way their pace is, their defense, that hitting 3-point shots when you have the rare opportunities is huge for this team. They have to probably be above 35% in order for it to work for this team, and not below 20.
Yeah.
So the fact that they still pulled it out makes it even more impressive. But that type of shooting performance, they have to get it at least into the 30s. something like that. You can't operate like they did, especially as you go deeper into the Big 12 season and eventually into the conference and NCAA tournament.
You're being too nice, Joe. They were 3 of 20 from downtown, not 3
Oh,
of
man.
19. Yeah, you're giving them too much credit. 15% from beyond the arc. That was what the Longhorns were on Monday. And that last Trey Mitchell 3 that he banked in, which was the biggest shot of the game for Texas, that was one of those, no. Oh, great shot. Great shot. Like,
so
he's open for a reason, Joe.
Right.
He was 0 of 5. He talked about it. He was open on most of those looks. They just weren't even close. So when he pulled up for that 3, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Nice shot.
So funny story about that. There's if you go to the Irwin Center, there's the west entrance, right along, I think that's Red River. You go down, you have like that courtside club to your right. You go down those little sets of stairs and you go right. Then they have Lone Star Room's just at the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
You go down the stairs, there's courtside club, which is really big donors. And there's a media room, which is where they have interviews post game. The next door past the media room is the Texas locker room, and a little bit down the way is the visitors locker room. And normally they have the visitors go first in the media availability, that type of thing. And I think they had McCormick and Wilson come through. Well, at a certain point, Trey Mitchell was ahead of them. I don't know where exactly he was going, but Trey Mitchell said, like, it's like, I told you I called bank or something like that. And I heard Jalen Wilson walking into the media room, going up to the podium, just kind of mutter under his breath, like, there's no way that guy called bank. There's no way that guy called bank. So even to that point, it was a very much a no. Yes, got it. All right, good. And Kansas was, that's probably the shot Bill Self was fine with Texas taking, and it just didn't work out that way. But one thing, I put this in my post-game write-up, that last shot by Texas, I know there's been a lot of criticism of Marcus Carr's ability as a facilitator, but without him getting downhill, that doesn't open up that shot. And because he was able to get downhill, Kansas went in a 2-3 zone. The top left, if you're facing the offense, the top left defender had to carry Carr all the way to the rim. Mm-hmm. He stopped in the paint. Allen was right there and hit that elbow jumper because of Carr's penetration. So there's good and bad from that game, but that last shot, it shows that Marcus Carr, can play up to some situations, and B, that Timmy Allen is this team's offensive, go-to guy.
Agreed. Timmy Allen's the most important player on this team, and you've been saying that for weeks, right? For a while, I thought it was Marcus Carr, and obviously Marcus Carr is important, but Marcus Carr balled out against Texas Tech, and Texas couldn't do anything with it. Like, Timmy Allen was a no-show in Lubbock. In the last 2 games, he's been the facilitator and kind of the de facto point guard for this offense, and Texas has looked a lot better offensively because of it. So, Timmy Allen, what he can do in the mid-range, man, there aren't a lot of guys in today's college basketball that can do that from there. And I'm glad that you brought that up, just the aggression from Carr on that play. We saw that aggressiveness from Texas all night. Like, they were 3 of 20 from 3. And should a team that shoots the ball as poorly as Texas be jacking up 23s a night? Probably not. They shot 47 twos. It's not like they were relying on the 3. And my favorite stat, we've talked about a lot of stats, and I don't want to be stats guy here, but like the stat that backs up my point about Texas's aggression, they got to the free throw line 23 times, and they made 20 of them. Mm-hmm. Like, when Texas struggles offensively, they're settling. Right? They're dribbling the ball for 25 seconds, and they're jacking up a bad shot. Like, they were penetrating. They were getting the ball down low. Trey Mitchell was 8 of 8 from the free throw line in the first half, which is why I'm so pissed that Mitchell keeps shooting threes. Because, like, if you give him the ball in the low block, he can make stuff happen, or he can get fouled to get some easy points at the charity stripe. Like, that type of aggression, we need more of that from Texas. Like, force the officials to make a tough call. Penetrate. Drive and kick opens up. You get some easy baskets at the rim, or at worst, you're going to the free throw line. So we didn't see that in Lubbock. We didn't see that in that Seton Hall game that you talked about earlier. It was just way too much settling for Texas. Joe, this team and most teams in today's college basketball don't have the shooters to where they can just be content settling for a bunch of jumpers over the course of a 40-minute game. That's the type of offensive intensity and aggression that I want to see from Texas moving forward. And if they play that way, it feels like they can hang with most teams across the country.
Exactly, especially with the way their defense operated in that game and so far. So last thing on Kansas, what do you think of the court storming?
Oh man, I'm such an old man when it comes to court storming. I'm a court storm snob, and I texted a couple of my buddies after the game, and they called me that, and they're right. I just I don't think Texas should be court storming, man. If we went to Iona and covered Iona and you beat Kansas, that's fine. Storm the court. But like, I know Texas basketball is not Texas football. I know Texas basketball is not Texas baseball. I get it. It's third. It will always be third, whatever. But like, Texas football ain't storming the field. When's the last time Texas football stormed the field? The Houston game back in 1990. Like even then, like that was before we were born, and I'm still like, really? We rushed the field as Texas football? Like, come on. I don't care how good Houston was. I don't care how bad Texas was before that. Like, come on. Texas baseball. They don't dogpile until they win the national championship, right? Like, I know Texas basketball isn't that, but man, I don't like the idea of rushing the floor ever when you're Texas. And Joe, Texas opened that game as a favorite. I know it closed as Kansas as a 1-point favorite, but like it wasn't like a massive shocking upset that nobody expected. Texas opened up as a favorite in that game. So I don't know, man. I'll get criticized. I'll get called an old man. People will tell me that I don't want the kids to have fun. None of that's true. But I don't think Texas should be storming the floor, man. Especially when you're ranked and like you're trying to create this, hey, this is who we plan to be. We don't want this to be a one-off. Like we want this to be a consistent thing moving forward. I don't love the look.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing. I don't think it's going to be a consistent thing. And Chris Beard, normally after games, and he did this at Tech and he does it at Texas, normally there aren't as many students that there were at this game, aren't as many people in general, normally say, hey, come on down to the floor, students join, sing the Eyes of Texas with us. That's not what this was. That was a full-fledged court storming. Oh. And so I get where you're coming from. I think two things have altered it. One, and maybe this kind of serves to your point, maybe it serves mine, it's just more common these days. It really is. And in the SEC, Arkansas's athletic department, when they stormed the field versus Texas, $250,000 fine. When they stormed the field or stormed the court the other night when they beat Auburn, $250,000 fine. It's only $25,000 in the Big 12. So maybe there's not as much of an incentive for schools to stop it as there are in other places. The other thing is, this was the last time Kansas will play in the Irwin Center. And it also is a way just for excitement to build in the program. There were students there, I'd say 35. No, when I walked in, that was about an hour before tip-off, and those 4 lower bowl student sections were all full. I think they had to turn some students away, which good and bad there. So right. They packed it in. They got there for that game, and involvement as far as students go, I'd say it's not smart. They're not making much noise on when the horns are on defense, unless the whole arena is, and they're not making good. They just stand and watch the game. It is what it is with Longhorn basketball student section. So, but that was one of the best crowds I've seen at the Irwin Center in several years, and kind of glad they got to see a good reward. And whatever, let them storm the floor. They're not going to do it for against Baylor, and they're not going to do it against who's the other home game, TCU. So yeah, might as well.
Or Texas Tech. Hell, if Tech wins, they might storm the court. There might be more Tech fans in the building next Saturday. Look, I'm not losing any sleep over it, and I can already read.
Nor are you losing $25,000. So.
Right, exactly. So, and look, it was Texas's best chance at an impressive home win this season. Right, Kansas, the best team in the Big 12, the best team that was coming into Austin. Like, if there's a game you're going to do it, I guess that would be the game to do it. And look, if I was a student there, I would have been at the game. Obviously, I would have been in the student section. Obviously, I would have stormed the court. Like, I would have been the first guy out there. I wouldn't have been spearheading the storm, and I still would have been like, what are we doing? But like, I'm not going to be the guy who's like, nope, you guys go. I'm going to stay here. And my morals, I don't feel that strongly. I don't feel that strongly about it to where I'm just going to be like totally anti that, and I'm going to chastise anybody who did it. But I would have preferred for them not to do it.
Well, too late now. So,
yeah. I know.
What about this Baylor game coming up? I'll be headed to the Farrell Center, getting up early Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Fran will be in the building. And let's see, Baylor's been having injury issue. I'm trying to look through their roster.
Yeah.
LJ Cryer seems to be having injury issues, and then there one more who's been kind of hit or miss lately.
Flagler's been hurt a lot, but he played against Kansas over the weekend, and he did play. I think he played last night against K-State, and Baylor's win in Manhattan. So Cryer's the big guy who's still out. He's their leading scorer. They've got a lot of talented pieces. Like, they're still more than good enough to beat Texas without LJ Cryer, but they haven't been the same Baylor since he got hurt. And Baylor got off to that phenomenal undefeated start. I think they got all the way to number 1 in the country. And people are having questions like, oh my God, is this year's Baylor's team as good as last year's Baylor team? Could they be better than the defending national champs? Like, how is this possible? We found out that it wasn't possible.
No.
Like, that's not really a shot at this year's Baylor team. That, like, last year's team was just ridiculously good, and Baylor lost its 3 best players from a season ago. So understandable that there would be some sort of drop off. The fact that this is still a top 10 team competing for a Big 12 title, despite all that they lost, is a testament to Scott Drew and the program he's built in Waco. So Baylor, though, over the last 9 games, Joe, they're just 5-4. And I think everybody saw them get absolutely lambasted by Kansas over the weekend. Like that, it's a different Baylor team this year, and it's a more beatable Baylor team. Baylor's going to be favored. They should be favored. I think Baylor's going to win. Spoiler alert. I don't think they're as good of a matchup for Texas as Kansas was. But, like, if there's a quote unquote maybe good time to be playing Baylor, it's right now, while they're not 100% healthy, and they're clearly not in the spot that they were at the start of the season.
Yeah, we'll see what happens if let's see if I can get this right. I know I've heard it before, so I think I got it. Jonathan Shamwa Chachua.
There you go.
If he's rebounding, it's going to be tough for Texas. I'm also pretty curious to see the good old Brock Cunningham versus Matthew Mayer matchup. That's going to be fun to watch, because I bet those guys had some lighthearted battles when they were working over at Westlake, but I bet this battle is not going to be lighthearted. What about, I guess, we've seen over the past couple of weeks, maybe just the past week, Brock Cunningham's been starting, but he hasn't really been getting starters minutes. And that's a little bit due to Andrew Jones just wanting to be a 6-man and taking on that role. And I think, part of it's also a little bit due to Lowell mentioned this, but last Thursday, Trey Mitchell rolled his ankle in practice lightly enough and we saw Christian Bishop kind of I think he stepped on somebody during the course of the Kansas game. So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on Brock Cunningham being in the starting lineup, but still not getting a bunch of starters minutes.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last week, right? You can't have a plan for Brock Cunningham. I just don't think that works. Like, you can't go into a game saying, okay, he's got to play 25 minutes tonight, or he's got to play 30 minutes tonight, or he's got to start, or he's got to come on. Like, he's just such a wild card. It's got to be a feel thing for Brock Cunningham. So, like, you get him out there early, and if he's doing Brock things or Brock plays, as Chris Beard likes to call him, then you keep him out there. Like, you keep him out there and let him do his thing, where he's diving on the floor for loose balls, he's drawing charges, he's attacking the offensive glass, he's creating second possessions, he's doing all the dirty work things that good Brock Cunningham does. But, like, if it's not there, and sometimes it's not there, then you can't force it. And I'm worried about this matchup against Baylor, because there are 2 things that Baylor possesses that even Kansas didn't really possess. And I know Texas doesn't possess these things. Baylor's longer, and Baylor's more athletic than Texas. Brock Cunningham is not super long, and he is not very athletic. So I don't know if this is like one of those, hey, Brock Cunningham has to play a lot of minutes type of games. I don't know if I'm relying on Brock Cunningham to be a huge factor in Waco. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully he balls out and does the Brock plays, and we get good Brock Cunningham this weekend. But, like, I just get worried when you're going up against super athletic teams, and Baylor is a super athletic team, about having Brock Cunningham. And it's not just Cunningham. Like, there are a lot of athletes on this team. Like, that part of the matchup really scares me going into Saturday.
The other thing that's been interesting is, and this is me coming out, I don't know why Jace Febres gets minutes. I really don't, because he's a 3-point guy who's not hit a 3-pointer. I think he's hit 1 3-pointer this calendar year. So, and he played decent against Kansas. He did all right. Part of me wonders if there's just not enough where this depth is on this team a little bit, because if he is getting those minutes, Why not? Why not Avery Vincent? I don't know. I'm just one of those people who like Jace is kind of a one-trick guy. Now, I showed a second trick with a dribble drive in the left hand against Kansas, but that was all he got.
Yeah.
And if he's not hitting three-pointers, he's not a upgrade in defense anywhere. So I'm wondering why he's still getting minutes. And I know this is his last year, and I know he's stuck around, and Chris Beard probably is trying to reward him some, but I get why Devin Askew plays, and it's sometimes out of necessity. I don't get why Jace Febres plays.
It's hard to argue in favor of Jace Febres right now. And yeah, I think his 1-3 that he hit this year was on January 4th. I don't think he's hit a 3 since then. And we're recording this on February 10th. So for a guy who's a supposed sharpshooter, he hasn't been shooting very sharply this season. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's not a plus defender. He's not a plus facilitator. Like, he's an off guard who's supposed to be a good shooter. And it's just not happening right now. So I don't know. I think it's a depth issue. I don't think it's Chris Beard like, hey, I'm going to throw you a bone because you stayed here for an extra year, and I appreciate that. I think he just doesn't feel like he has a whole lot of options in his backcourt. Yeah. And like, in a perfect world, Andrew Jones is just more consistent. Like, I would have played Andrew Jones a little bit more on Monday, I think, but Andrew Jones is just not a good defender. And he was 0 for 5 from beyond the arc. So, like, if we get Iowa State Andrew Jones all the time, then I don't think you're going to see Jace Febres. But, like, if Andrew Jones is just not Andrew Jones and Devin Askew isn't looking that great, then it almost feels like out of necessity, where Chris Beard's like, hey, I gotta give some minutes to somebody to see if somebody can do anything. So,
yeah, Devin Askew was doing all right. He kind of plateaued, and then it hadn't been great in these past couple of games. So
he just shoot the ball, Devin. Like, not threes, but like, when you get within a foot of the hoop, you're going to have to shoot. If it's a 3-on-2 and they're giving you a wide open layup, you're going to have to take that layup. Now, that possession did ultimately turn into a Timmy Allen 3-point play. So I guess it was better that he didn't shoot, but like, dude, I mean, like, I'm yelling at the TV when Trey Mitchell shoots. I'm yelling at the TV when Devin Askew doesn't shoot. It's like, can we get a balance between those two, please, Joe?
And the whole crowd was feeling that too. You could just tell it, just shoot. There were groans when Trey Mitchell put out that 3, but I think that kind of covers it. What's after? Is it TCU that comes after Baylor, or is
Norman?
It going to Norman? That's Norman. Right. And they just picked up. I don't know if you watched that game last night where they beat top 10 Texas Tech team, and they've been OU's been pretty inconsistent this year, but picked it up and put the points on the board that Tech just couldn't overcome. And the score was a little bit more than what that game indicated, but it in some respects, it indicated the game. It was Oklahoma was able to take control of that game, get things going on offense, shoot well, and just Texas Tech just didn't have the ability to keep up with them.
Yeah, OU needed that too. They were spiraling towards the bubble and maybe towards out of the tournament, but that was a huge win for them. 30 for Umoja Gibson, and then the SMU transfer, Ethan. I don't know. I always think it's Chargois. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. I'm like, is it that fancy, or does it just look that fancy? He defended really well against Bryson Williams. Bryson Williams had 5 points. Like, he's the best player on Texas Tech, and Chargois did a phenomenal job defending him. So yeah, like, we're talking about this 5-game gauntlet that Texas is in, and they're 3-1 right now. And we talked about it before it started, Joe, this 5-game stretch against ranked teams. I'm like, man, if they go 3-2, that's great. And at worst, they're going to go 3-2, right? They could go 4-1 if they pull off another upset in Waco this weekend, but 3-2 is great. But then after that, you've got at OU rivalry game against a tournament team who just beat Texas Tech. And then you've got Texas Tech who just whooped your ass coming back to Austin. So it's like, I've been focused on this stretch, but it's not like it gets a whole lot easier for Texas. I guess that's life in the Big 12.
So let's see, we're about a month away, I think, from Selection Sunday, around there. What's your call on Texas's seed line? Without going too far into the weeds, what do you think they end up as? Yeah,
maybe I cheated because I have gone pretty far into the weeds over the last couple of days. I mean, once the calendar hits February, I'm looking at bracket matrix. I'm looking at every bracketology. I'm checking Ken Palm like every day, like religiously. So, like, as of right now, the bracket matrix, which once again compiles every bracketologist from around the country, they've got Texas as a 5 seed, like the last 5 seed, but a 5 seed, and that's after
top
the
20, right?
So that would be, top 20. That'd be 20th, I guess, right now.
Yeah.
So at this moment, I feel like 5 is fair for Texas. It could go up 2 and down 2. I mean, I guess technically it could go down further than that if Texas completely tailspins down the stretch. I don't want to even knock on wood right now, so I don't speak that into existence. But I mean, if you're asking me to make a prediction, like where I think they'll ultimately be, I'll go 6. 6 feels right. I mean, look, I was like projecting the rest of their schedule, and what are they, 7-4 in Big 12 play right now? Like we were talking about it. If they win 8 conference games, they're going to be in. They're going to win more than 8 conference games. So like if they get to 9 and it's like, all right, that's good. They're fine there too. But like they should get to 10 and maybe 11 if things go right. Like 10 or 11 feels like the mix. And that to me feels like a 6 seed at minimum, especially if they can win a game in Kansas City. So I'll go 6. That feels like the most neutral. I think they could get to a 3 if all things go really well down the stretch.
Right.
And I think if they struggle, they could be in the 8-9 conversation. So I'll go 6.
Okay. I see. The thing about 6 is that means what? If you get an 11, is that's typically a mid-major conference tournament champion, right?
Yeah. Well, the last time Texas was a 6, they got.
Don't remind me.
Yeah.
I don't need to know about that game.
So it could be a team like that. I'm looking at the 11 seeds right now on bracket matrix. They've got BYU. Oh God, Miami, North Carolina, and Oregon. So those are the bracket matrix 11 seeds right now. Of course, they have Texas as a 5. I won't read the 12s. You can go to that website yourself. We won't bore you all with that. But like, yeah, you could get I mean, Loyola of Chicago, like I think they were an 11 seed on their Final Four run. So you could get like a conference champ from a smaller conference, or you could get just a bubble power team that just sneaks into the NCAA tournament. So that's usually the conversation there.
Man, it's nice to think about like seeding and not.
I know. It's so great.
I
hope we can talk about a freaking tournament win, Joe, because it's been too damn long.
We'll see. Basketball talk. You want to talk about some 2023 recruiting?
Let's do it.
All right. So, what 2023 recruit are you most familiar with?
Arch Manning, of course.
There you go. Okay. So, Texas, along with Clemson, I think Alabama and Georgia. Those seem to be the main suitors for Arch Manning. And from everything we've heard over inside Texas, and we've been tracking this recruitment for a while, ever since his visit for the Oklahoma State game. Basically, Texas is in a great spot with Arch Manning. They like Sarkisian. They like the idea. They're open to the idea of, probably redshirting, considering that, hey, sometimes it takes a little bit more of development and time to get a guy ready to play. And Arch, yeah, he might be good enough to play as a true freshman, but I think the Mannings seem to understand that that's not a necessity for him. And that's one of the things that, despite them keeping everything close to the vest, that's one of the things that we at Inside Texas have kind of heard about. But Texas went 5-7.
Yeah.
And whether your last name is Manning or whether your last name is who cares? That's going to take a toll on any recruiting effort. So, and the other thing is, Texas has not really pivoted at all from pursuing Arch Manning. They're going against the heavy hitters, but this one looks like Texas is going to be in it until very end. And I doubt the Mannings are a flip type family or anything like that, but Steve Sarkisian's offensive acumen, it's one of the reasons Quinn Ewers decided to come back, and B, one of the reasons why Texas is so in it for Arch Manning.
Yeah, the Mannings don't flip until draft day, right? They wait till the NFL draft and then they decide they don't want to be there.
They don't want to go to San Diego. Yeah.
That's how it works for them. A minor miracle that Texas is still in the mix for Arch Manning. Joe, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What's better case scenario for Texas? Is it if Texas goes 5-7 again and doesn't get consistent quarterback play to where Arch Manning's like, man, if I go there, I'll start day one and I can turn that program around? Or is it Texas goes 9-3 to 10-2, Quinn Ewers looks really good, and Arch Manning's like, okay, like things can obviously work at Texas. Like out of those two, because it's weird because Quinn Ewers would still have more eligibility left. I guess he could go pro after next year. But like, obviously Arch Manning couldn't step in and start right away if Quinn Ewers looks really good this season. Or on the other hand, it's like, oh, Texas is bad, but Arch Manning's like, man, I could play from day one.
I think it's a second scenario because I think a 5-7 season kind of shows Arch like, oh, I can't win at Texas. No matter what, if they have, if they have Quinn Ewers or if it's Hudson Card, who still has a lot of, passing pedigree and at least a good reputation. He's got to start living or showing it on the field, but he has a good reputation as far as passing goes. So if neither of those two can put together a good season for Texas to get more than 5 wins, then yeah, it's going to be tough sledding as far as that recruitment goes. But it looks like they're going to be in contention. I think Arch is going to take some more visits this upcoming spring. I bet Texas is going to get one of those visits, and he's a guy who has downstream impacts on other guys in the class, including one of the top wide receivers in Texas, and John Cook. And does the idea of a wide receiver who is trying to figure out, at least from everything we've gathered, trying to figure out whether he should go to A&M and play in that offense or go to Texas and play in that offense, does that give you any flashbacks, any, oh no, here we go again, considering some of the wide receiver recruitments we've seen over the past couple of years?
I'm sure it does. Is there a name that you're thinking about that I should be thinking about? Oh, Mr. Stewart. Yeah.
Damon Demas.
Yeah.
There's been a couple.
Yeah, so. You're right. Look, I would love, best case scenario for Texas is Arch Manning not only commits, but commits early. You'll take him committing anyway. If he puts pen to paper and ultimately decides to sign with Texas, it's all good. I don't care when it happens. I'm just happy it happens. But best case scenario is Arch Manning commits early, and there's that domino effect, right? Where just a bunch of big time 2023 recruits want to go play with Arch Manning. Like, that's how it works. That's generally how it works. When the top quarterback commits somewhere, we saw it with Chris Sims at Texas 20 years ago. Like, top QB in the country wants to go to this school, other people follow. Not only offensive players too, like defensive guys are like, hell, man, I want to have that guy.
I want to be a part of it. Yeah,
exactly. So best case scenario would be Arch Manning commits early. And that would obviously help with guys like Jonte Cook and some of the other top skill position players in this class of 2023. So yeah, I got a hunch the Cook recruitment though is gonna be going on for a long time, Joe. I don't think we're gonna get any resolution on that one for a while.
I'll see if I could put some family members on him, considering anyway. But another recruit that's kind of linked to Arch and Jonte kind of as a trio is Ruben Owens, known as his nickname?
The Black Unicorn. Is that
the Black Unicorn?
Is that a self-proclaimed nickname, or like do other people actually call him that? Have we figured that out?
I think it became both.
Okay.
But I think it started inside the Ruben Owens household. But El Campo, running back, one-time Texas commit. This is going to be he's the best football player on basically every field he steps on. And when I'm looking at kids who go to these 3A, 4A level schools, that's what I want to see right away. I want to see that Jordan Whittington factor. I want to see trying to think some other players just like that, the Dalton and Doug Brooks factor. Jonathan Brooks for Hallettsville. He was pretty much the best player on every field that he stepped on. So I want to see that, and I think that's exactly what Ruben Owens offers. It kind of like with Arch, they haven't really pivoted away from two other 2023 running backs. It could be a 2 running back class, considering I think you lose both. You're gonna Rashawn Johnson, although he could take the COVID year, I think he's going. This will be his senior year. Mm-hmm. Bijan Robinson, he's a 3-year player. We all know that. I think everybody's operating with that understanding. This is probably going to be a 2-back class, but this is the one that Texas is really focusing on, and one that is going to take a lot of different schools, Texas to top a lot of different schools, because Ruben is going to visit Georgia and has a couple times, LSU. He'll probably visit A&M. He'll probably visit Alabama. He'll visit Texas. Who knows if this Oklahoma regime will get him on campus. But this is another, just like with Jonte Cook, just like with Arch Manning. This is another recruitment that Texas is going to have to battle some national powers for in order to win.
Despite the decommitment, do you still feel like Texas is in good standing with Ruben Owens?
Yeah, I think they definitely are. Because of that decommitment, it was really early. I mean, it was before his junior year, or I think about a year ago. So he was young. It gives Texas a lot of time to, I don't want to say make up ground, but renormalize things after an event like a decommitment. And he's just down Highway 71. He's not too far from Texas, and that's going to play a factor in trying to earn his signature down the road.
It'd be an awesome set of triplets to land for Texas.
Exactly.
Right. Get that quarterback and Arch Manning, get the running back, and Ruben Owens, get the receiver, and Jonte Cook. Like, you'll take any of those guys, but if you could find a way to land all three, then that's the type of class that can really turn things around.
Yeah, we've been talking about offensive guys, and I think those are the main ones. But Texas does have one 2023 commit in its class right now, and Arlington Seguin's Jamel Johnson. He probably plays a lot of corner, but he's been sold as a versatile piece, a guy who can play a bunch of different positions in the secondary. I think he's already taken a visit elsewhere. I think that's just kind of with a lot of these kids who never had these opportunities to go to junior days as sophomores and some as juniors. They're going to take their visit opportunities. They had an entire year and a half period of dead period. So I think they're going to be able to. They're going to look and see what's out there. But Jamel Johnson, a guy in the DFW area, Arlington Seguin, who provides some versatility in the back end, and kind of interesting that it starts with a defensive back and not a quarterback. But I think that's just the nature of recruiting Arch Manning at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm curious where Johnson will play at the next level, right? Some sites have him as a safety. Some sites have him as a corner. 6'1", 175. He's got the size to play both. I think he could and probably will put on a few more pounds by the time he gets to college, and obviously once he's at college too. But yeah, I mean, I'm cool with it. 4-star secondary piece. We've seen the secondary play at Texas over the last few years. It's left a lot to be desired. So I'm okay with bringing in anybody who can potentially help turn things around. So like the little bit of film I've watched on Jamel Johnson, and hopefully Texas is able to turn that commitment into a signature when it's all said and done.
The other Arlington defensive back that they need to get is Arlington Martin's Javian Toviano.
Yeah.
And by having Maurice Blackwell, Travell Johnson, and doing well in Arlington in general, getting Devon Campbell. Let's see. I think that's about it. Bowie. I mean, they had Shane Buechele for a little bit, but he's probably more associated with SMU at this point. But doing well in Arlington may help them get a guy who could be the top corner in the 2023 class. And really, you can never have too many elite cornerbacks, especially in the Big 12 as it operates right now, and kind of going forward in the SEC. They're going to have these wide receivers, and that Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, John Mechie mold, kind of in that 6'0" to 6'2", 180, 190 pound range, who are burners. And you need to have these guys who can rough them up at the line of scrimmage and be able to play them and be able to play over the top of them. And Javian Toviano is definitely a guy who can do that type of thing.
I don't know if the 2023 kids are going to play in the Big 12 at all, but newsflash to the national guys who for some reason can't grasp this: the SEC is more like the Big 12 from 15 years ago than ever before. It's almost like the conferences have switched roles a little bit.
Yeah, Big 12 was a running conference this past year.
Right, yeah, Big 12 has been running in defense more the last couple of seasons, while the SEC is like taking more air raid principles and is playing more games in the 30s and 40s versus what they used to be. So, yeah, look, it doesn't matter what conference you're in. Big 12, SEC, whenever Texas makes the move to the SEC, they're going to need talented secondary pieces because both leagues have really, really good wide receiver play. And, yeah, when you're going up against Alabama and LSU and Georgia and A&M, like, you've got to have corners who can hang. So getting Toviano, who I think is the top corner in the state as well, would be absolutely massive for this team.
And then just kind of to wrap things up, Texas has to win this year. You saw that the NIL plus a couple coaching carousel moves being made, plus being in the first year, which does give you some leeway on the recruiting trail. That helped Texas a lot. It helped them to get that roster resetting offensive line in class with 2 5-stars. It helped them get, the portal helped them in multiple regards. Like, they had a lot of breaks, a lot of things go their way. Going 5-7 again, you're not going to get those breaks. You're not going to get. You're going to start to be judged on what's actually happening. So we always say Texas has to win this year. We even on Inside Texas, we kind of wrote that this is the year before the year as far as the season on the field results may go. But they can't go 5-7. They can't toy with 4-8. They need to go above 500 without a doubt in order to have as much success as they think they should have in this 2023 class.
Let me ask you this as we're kind of wrapping things up here. Does Sark get a 2023 if Texas goes 5-7 in 2022? I mean, like, if it's 7-5, he'll be back, of course. Like, if they have the winning record that you talked about, then yeah, he'll get a third year. His seat will be warm, but he'll get a third year. But if they go sub 500 in back-to-back years, like, does he get a third year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Charlie Strong got 3 years, and Charlie Strong had what, I think.
I mean, Charlie at least got to a bowl game in year 2.
That's
true. They lost it and
it
finished sub 500.
No, that was year 1. That was
you're
right.
One. And then it was 5-7, 5-7.
And Charlie had $15 million protecting him, and it wasn't enough. Sark will have, I think, around like 20+ million protecting him. So, and I don't really know who the next guy is. I mean,
all right. We don't have to talk about it.
I think if he went 5-7, he would come back.
Okay.
But his seat would be pretty hot.
Yeah. Okay.
So
well, hopefully we don't have to have that conversation during the season, but
I hope we don't have to either. So
what a crappy way to end. What a crappy way to end a good podcast.
Hey, so you haven't been paying attention. I got a screen up. James Harden got traded.
I just saw that. I just saw that.
So you're going to have some good thing for the Rockets. That Brooklyn team is kind of falling apart, and there's some pick swaps in there. Real quick, I know you've basically been talking about it all week, but kind of overarching thoughts. Lovie Smith for Houston.
Could have been worse. Could have been a lot worse, and it could have been better. Lovie Smith was not my first choice. If you asked any Texans fan at the start of this process if Lovie Smith was their first choice, I don't think anybody would have told you yes. But
I don't think anybody would have said he was the choice.
But yeah. I mean, when your options were Josh McCown or Lovie Smith, then I think people would side with Lovie Smith. Like, I firmly believe, and people I've talked to behind the scenes tell me the same thing, that Josh McCown was going to be the next head coach of the Houston Texans. Then the Brian Flores lawsuit came out, caused the Texans to pivot and shift gears. And that's when they ultimately decided that, all right, let's just hire Lovie Smith to not avoid this S-storm that would be coming our way if we gave Josh McCown, a white guy with zero coaching experience at the NFL or college level, the job as our head coach.
Yeah, I'm maybe this is the optimist in me, but I'm kind of fooling myself to think Lovie running the defense, and the Texans defense hasn't been awful. It's been it's not been stocked with good personnel. That's for sure. Yeah. But it's been okay.
Sure.
And I like the idea of Pep Hamilton calling things. So, and especially now that you're going to rebuild, and I think this draft year, you probably go O-line, or if Aiden Hutchinson falls to you, you maybe take him, or you trade. Like it's not what I thought it would be. I thought it'd be either McCown or, I thought it was going to be Flores before the lawsuit happened. But I think what the sense that I have is that a guy like O'Connell said, yeah, I'll come here, but if I got to have some discretion that certain other people in the front office should not have, and I think that was shot down.
Yeah.
They probably were going to be cool with Flores until the lawsuit came out, realized that it wasn't going to help them and factor that wasn't going to be a situation that they wanted to deal with. And then they just got to the point, well, we need somebody. Can't be McCown. So they went with Lovie. And the thing is, they can keep Lovie, keep Pep Hamilton, which I think is the most important thing. And they can probably put McCown on staff. Now, if they just axe Lovie in 2 years to elevate McCown, which I wouldn't put it past this franchise of doing. I'll squirm about it and kind of wonder why they, waited to do that anyway. But it all things considered, I think it's as okay of a result. I expect a disaster with this team.
I mean, they've made so many god-awful.
This was not a total disaster,
right.
But it wasn't the best hire ever.
Yeah, they've made so many god-awful decisions over the last 3 or 4 years that when they don't make the worst decision possible, it feels like a win. And that's where we're at right now. So there's some optimism here just because it's not McCown. I think it's more people are excited that it's not McCown versus that like, oh, Lovie's going to be some amazing coach. But Lovie he did a great job at the press conference. And he's a good bridge guy for a couple of years after the Texans fired a bridge guy after 1 year. But that's where we're at in Houston. So there you go.
That's what happens when you got Cal run things. Anything else? I think that does it.
That's it, man. Good stuff. Talking Texas basketball, talking some Texas football, a little bonus Houston Texans talk at the end. But appreciate y'all listening. Thanks for the continued love and support. Make sure y'all follow Joe on Twitter at JosephCook89. Check out the great work he does over at InsideTexas.com. Make sure you subscribe over there if you haven't done that already. You can follow me at Brad Kellner. Listen to The Wheelhouse on ESPN Houston every weekday afternoon from 3 to 7 on ESPN975.com. Thanks again to our sponsors, Audio-Visual Consultations and Altstat Beer. And thanks to you for Joe Cook. I am BK Brad Kellner. Until next time, y'all stay safe. Y'all stay healthy. And hook 'em.